to this edition of the Persecution Report, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the truth behind current situations in Bangladesh. I'm Professor Bidit Day. We'll take you through this episode as we take a deep dive into the troubling minority rights situation in Bangladesh under the unconstitutional leadership of Muhammad Yunus. Despite Yunus's public denials of allegations surrounding attacks on minorities, dismissively labeling them fake news spun by foreign adversaries, harrowing accounts from human rights organizations, diaspora communities, international observers, as well as eyewitnesses on the ground, tell a starkly different story. The nation is currently grappling with a surge of distressing incidents, from the horrifying vandalism of sacred temples and brutal mob lynchings of politically charged arrests and chilling suppression of dissent. The regime stands accused of unleashing a tempest of religious and ethnic persecution. Vulnerable groups such as Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, indigenous people, as well as Sufi and Ahmadiyya communities find themselves plunged into a climate of fear. At this moment, no one is truly safe in Bangladesh. Yet, for those belonging to religious or ethnic minorities, the peril is magnified exponentially. In today's episode, we explore documented incidents revealing grim statistics: over 2,000 brazen assaults on the lives, properties, businesses, and places of worship belonging to various minority groups. Esteemed international organizations like Amnesty International, Transparency International, and Human Rights Watch have sounded alarms, spotlighting a cruel wave of violence and torture that has surged following the political changes occurred in August 2024. While the majority of these attacks took place between August 4th and August 29th, subsequent months have continued to witness a relentless tide of violence and persecution. Many of these acts seem to be state-sponsored or occurred under the regime's ominous watch, emboldening perpetrators with impunity. This episode also scrutinizes the role of the judiciary and the stifling of media, mechanisms that enable Yunus's government to cultivate a culture of denial, obfuscating truths, and shielding the perpetrators from accountability. Without further ado, I will straight get into today's discussion. I have a panel of experts present today to discuss this issue. I have Mr. Mohibul Islam Chaudhry Naufal, former organizing secretary, Bangladesh Awami League. We have Ms. Jasmine Chaudhry, senior public health practitioner and social justice campaigner. And we have Mr. Anwar Shada Jihan, aerospace engineer and columnist. First of all, I would like to request Mr. Jihan to take us through some of the slides he has to put a perspective of what's happening in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day, for inviting me today, and a special thanks to our guest, former organizing secretary of Bangladesh Awami League, Mr. Mohibul Hassan Chaudhry Naufal, a very familiar face to our younger crowds, and our very own, the wonderful Ms. Chaudhry. Former Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, once said, "In a democracy, the majority will always have its way, but the minority must have its say." For gaining insight into the health of democracy in a given society, we must look at the overall condition of the minority communities. In Bangladesh, historically, the minority communities have been comparatively served better by the Awami League government. Here we have to understand Awami League is the party of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Bangabandhu was not a political leader for any particular group. He was a political leader for all humanity. So when the Awami League government was forcefully removed last year by a violent coup, a reign of terror has descended upon the minority communities of Bangladesh. Their lives, properties, and places of worship have been attacked, looted, and vandalized. While all these atrocities were taking place, human rights organizations from Amnesty International to the Human Rights Watch have expressed their repeated concerns about these issues. However, the unconstitutional, the illegal Yunus regime could care less about these concerns. According to a report by the Bangladesh Hindu Buddhist Christian Unity Council, there have been a total of 2,442 incidents of violence against religious and ethnic minorities in a matter of only 330 days. And this is a very small numbers because these are just the reported numbers. The actual numbers, especially in the rural areas, are much, much higher. And as you will see in the following slides, the violence includes murders, violence against women, including sexual assault, attacks on places of worship, forced occupations of home and businesses, and we are even hearing accusations of forced conversion. The situation is so bleak, so dark, that there may be a fake Facebook post, and the next day, a whole village is gone. This was the case in a village in Sunamganj, where Akash Das, a young Hindu man, allegedly posted a derogatory remark about the Holy Quran. And these allegations were amplified by the group of perpetrators that we discussed only a couple of weeks back, the influencers of instability. So violence mobs formed, chanting religious extremist slogans, wielding sticks and batons. They stormed into the Hindu homes. They destroyed their homes, looted their jewelries, properties, and set their houses on fire. More than 100 Hindu houses and businesses were completely done. The pressing issue here is that the top bureaucrat of that area, Mehennigar Tanu, tried downplaying these crimes. She tried downplaying these crimes by arguing that merely a few handful of houses were slightly destroyed. And this attitude of downplaying these crimes is prevalent from the bureaucrats to the very highest level of the state, Yunus himself. And they are not only downplaying these crimes. There are cases when Bangladesh police, including the Bangladesh army, the mighty Bangladesh army, are standing as silent spectators while violent mobs violently, very brutally, is attacking and oftentimes killing the minorities in Bangladesh. And that was the case for a young Hindu kid named Utsav Mondal, who allegedly posted a derogatory remark about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And these allegations were again spread by this group of perpetrators, and they wreak havoc on this man. We have seen his bloodied image on social media, and all this happened right in front of the mighty watch of Bangladesh army. And this group of perpetrators were shouting and chanting that no cops would be able to save you. No cop can protect you, as if they knew that Yunus and the illegal interim regime is in cahoot with the extremists. Similarly, in another incident, another young man in Faridpur, Hriday Pal, there was another accusations of blasphemy against him. He also allegedly posted a photo or comment about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And right after that, violent mob formed again. We have seen Bangladesh military officials carrying him blindfolded, beating him head to toe, while the mobs were chanting, shouting, saying that please beat him on the sole of his feet. This is for the peace of our mind. This is for the peace of our eyes. And the mighty Bangladesh army, the brave Bangladesh army, followed suit, as if it was a direct scene from the Liberation War of 1971, when Pakistani hyenas did the same thing to our Hindu brothers. And while in Bangladesh all these atrocities are taking place, if someone dared to protest, They are facing the brutal crackdown of the Yunus regime. And that has been the case for Chinmay Prabhu, a Hindu monk, who all he did was he demanded justice, he demanded protection, and he was charged with a fake citizen case and arrested. And then he was slapped with multiple fake fabricated murder charges after that. So protection is a far-reaching dream. And it is a far-reaching dream when all these atrocities are being backed by state power. How it is being backed by state power? If we look at the incident of Shikharani in Muradnagar, Kumilla, assistant head teacher in Muradnagar, Kumilla, then we will see how the state power is being used here. The father of the illegal advisor Asif Mahmood, the headmaster of the school, right after the fall of the Awami League government, this man formed a mob of 35 Muslim men and ran a brutal torture, mental, physical, and sexual torture on this lady. It was so severe that she fainted twice. And when this is being done by the father of the state advisor, you could only imagine how horrific it is and how helpless this lady was. And this state power is not, this state power backing is not coming only from the advisors themselves. Yunus himself is implicated. Since the fall in these 1 year, Yunus have been denying these allegations. Sometimes he is calling this as politically motivated charges by arguing that these minorities are the lackeys of the Awami League government. Even they are accepting that Awami League, during the Awami League time, minorities are better protected. In a latest interview in the international arena, Yunus asked the Hindus not to call themselves Hindus, rather to call themselves citizens. So this sends a chilling message to the whole world and to the extremist communities of Bangladesh that you are free to do whatever you want to the minority communities. And that's exactly what happened when like hundreds of idols and places of worships of the Hindus have been vandalized. And to protect the society, to protect the democracy in this country, the society must wake up, because we have seen that during the Second World War time when Hitler tried to erase the Jewish population from the face of the earth. And like Hitler, Yunus is doing the same thing. He's trying to erase the minority communities of Bangladesh. The society must wake up and pay heed. Back to you, Mr. De.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jihan. And undoubtedly, it's a very grim, very bleak situation. So I would like to invite Mr. Chaudhry to explain how it all started, because the international community was told that the so-called student-led movement was meant to erase discrimination and to create a fair and equitable society. But aftermath, that particular month of July, August, we saw that our minority communities fell a victim to these discriminations, harassment, and persecution. How do you see that? Over to you, Mr. Chaudhry. Thank you.
Thank you for thank you for inviting me here at this discussion today. I'd like to thank Mr. Anwar for his presentation. He has summarized what is happening in Bangladesh right now. To understand the situation there, one has to look at the incident itself, the July riot. I call it the July riot. So the demand for job and a quota-free entrance into the government, into government jobs, which was began with some populist elements in the movement. But we have seen the manner in which the whole movement uh, eventually be, uh, uh, turned into a mass killing frenzy, starting from destruction of public properties to targeting progressive people, political activists from different political spectrum, Awami League to other political parties, and security officials, police forces. The manner in which they were murdered, they were killed, burned, and after killing them, the manner in which they were hung on bridges, on roadsides, all of these incidents, all this, whatever they were doing, they reminded us of a sinister plan, not just a sinister plan, but what was happening in 1971, just how the Pakistani military and their collaborators were targeting the civilians of Bangladesh. So, and when the interim government took over, we've seen that they have suddenly brought Mr. Yunus into the scene, and on the 8th of August, he took over as the interim leader. Although the legality of it is totally questionable, it is an unconstitutional arrangement. The constitution does not provide for it, and whether there was any hearing held at the Supreme Court, we are still unsure about it. They have claimed that there was a presidential reference. We do not have any evidence of any hearing taking place, but in the end, Mr. Yunus took over. So you have to actually look at how it all started and the elements which were unleashed, the forces which were unleashed to oust a democratically elected civilian government, which which was, of course, secular, which was development minded, which has kept Bangladesh stable for a long time under the leadership of our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and they wanted to not only just oust her government, but also completely eradicate Awami Leaguers and other political dissidents from the grassroots to the top. And whilst they were doing that, they of course had in their mind a vision of a country which they want to achieve, which is another East Pakistan, if you like, another form of Pakistan. So when Mr. Jihan was showing us this misinformation social media campaign on blasphemous comments on religion, on the Holy Quran, and etc., if you look at the situation in Pakistan, this is how Pakistan eventually got rid of all of their minorities. They brought in blasphemy laws with fictitious claims that Christians and Hindus in Pakistani villages had made a comment on our Prophet or on the Holy Quran. And with these pretexts, they targeted the villages, they got rid of the villagers, they forcefully converted people, they killed, they judicially executed many because they violated the blasphemy law of Pakistan. So the objective is to bring in blasphemy law in Bangladesh. And why do they need it? Because they want to turn Bangladesh into another Pakistan. And Mr. Yunus, the man himself, if you look at his history, he was never part of our liberation war. He was in the United States, and there was a lot of effort by the non-resident Bangladeshis over there to raise fund, to raise awareness on the genocide that was happening in 1971. He took no part in any of this activism. He kept himself completely out of out of our movement in the United States. And the man, I said this to an Indian media outlet recently, where I said, he's the new Jinnah. Why is he the new Jinnah? If you look at the personality of Jinnah, who was an ultra-secular liberal Western man who used to have his alcohol and his pork sandwiches, and yet he was communal to the core. For his politics, he believed in communalism to rise up to power. And Mr. Yunus is exactly another version of Jinnah, where, however, how he lived his own life in the West and thereafter, hobnobbing with the global elite, with red wine glasses in his hand, and yet, for his objective, for his greed, for him to oust our government, he had unleashed all these fanatical forces and got them all united against us in a jihadist movement. As soon as he took over, the first step that he had taken was to release convicted terrorists, terrorists who were convicted based on information from the West, information from the regional intelligence agencies, who had taken part in Islamic State activities, Al Qaeda activities, and other terrorist activities, and they were duly convicted, serving time in prison overnight. All these people, all these fundamentalists, terrorists, jongi in Bangla, as you know, they were released from the prisons. And thereafter, what did he do? He released all the rapists, people who were serving time in the jails for conviction for rape and abuse of children. His law advisor, Mr. Asif Nazrul, there is not just rumor but clear evidence where a team of lawyers connected to him bailed the rapists out. And as a result, if you look at the number of rapes over the last 14 months in Bangladesh, it has quadrupled from the time we were in government. So our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina passed a specific law to convict, to prosecute, to try the rapists because of public demand. And these people were serving time in prison. And all of them were released overnight. And also lots of other miscreants, terrorists, mafia dons, in fact, those who belong to Awami League. And we, because of their deeds, their criminal offenses, we had arrested them. We put them in jail and they were serving times in there. And they took money from these people and released them. So Mr. Yunus's objective is to create maximum level of anarchy in the country so that he can continue to justify his illegal hold on power. And part of this whole anarchy is to actually attack minorities of all background, not just Hindus, not just Buddhists in Chittagong hill tracts, but also Sufi sects who do not believe in the Salafist Wahhabi theology of those who are being supported by Yunus regime. So you've seen an incident where a dead body of in a Sufi shrine were dragged out of the grave because apparently in his lifetime he had said something which is shirk, apparently, which is against the spirit of Islam, their version of Islam, of course, and they burned the whole body. And the desecration of grave was just the norm. You've heard of valiant freedom fighter Mr. Mainuddin Khan Badal's name, who was a big parliamentarian. He was a famous parliamentarian from Jashod, not even from Awami League. His grave was desecrated, and they put fire on his grave with some shoes. So from raping minorities and killing them to destroying Sufi shrines to attacking places of worships, this is the hallmark of of a society which does not work. And this is the justification why Yunus would like to continue his grip in power. Why? Because he will say that situation is still not conducive for an election, and Awami League is the reason why we are having all this trouble, and therefore we should ban Awami League and arrest the entire rank and file of Awami League. And I was in government. I was an MP. I was in the ministry for 5 months in the education ministry. If there is an allegation for corruption or misuse of power or misappropriation of public fund, it has to be against me because I was in charge of the ministry. You cannot go and arrest my activists who had taken no part in government decision making. What was their fault? If you are alleging that it was me who was corrupt or the party was, how can the whole party be a corrupt party, or the whole party take part in the unfortunate deaths that had occurred during this July riot?
On that note, Mr. Chaudhary, I beg your pardon for interjecting. So, just for the sake of clarity for our viewers, people may say that communal violence is not very new in the subcontinent. But would you agree? I mean, from your statement, we can deduce that it's not just isolated incidents, it's a state sponsored set of activities with a clear plan from the very top of the government. Would you agree on
Yes,
that?
absolutely. It is a state sponsored pogrom. The purge and the pogrom is state sponsored. It comes from the top. If you look at Yunus's advisorial panel, except for a few, most of them are in collusion with the perpetrators. His newly formed party, the NCP, they have brought in a couple of leaders from the NCP into the government. They are directly involved. Their families, their colleagues, their activists are directly involved in these activities. At the same time, BNP and Jamaat Islami and other political outfits who are firmly against the spirit of 1971, they've unleashed their jihadi force with the help of the law enforcement, with the help of the army itself. We've seen incidents where Bangladesh army personnel were directed by the government to shoot at innocent civilians in Gopalganj. When we were being ousted, it was a clear instruction from our prime minister that the army cannot shoot at the
Yeah.
citizens of the country, which is why these forces went out of control, and they saw it as a sign of weakness, not a sign of a humane instruction that lethal weapons are not to be used unless you are attacked and in self-defense. And by that time there were many police officials who were killed. But in this occasion, we have seen on the media and also on social media where one of the advisors were sitting. He was not from the home ministry. He was
Yeah.
Asif Mahmoud Bhuiya. He was sitting in the home ministry directing the military officials to go and shoot there, kill this person, or arrest so and so. So it was practically arranged by the government
Yeah.
of the day. So it is a
Thanks.
state-sponsored activity. And if you look at their time between 2001 and 6, during that time they did the same thing.
Same.
Between
Yeah.
2001 and 6, we have seen during that time terrorist groups were directly sponsored by the intelligence agencies of the time. We've seen 10 trucks full of arms and ammunition which were brought into Bangladesh to smuggle into India for the separatists and terrorist groups in India. So Bangladesh was basically exporting terrorism into the neighboring region, and in fact assisting the domestic terrorists to become international terrorists, from Bangla Bhai to Jamaitul Mujahideen to Ansarullah Bangladesh team,
Ansarullah.
Lashkar
Yeah.
Taiba. And during that time there were slogans given by these fanatics where they said, "Amra hobo Taliban, Bangla hobe Afghan." That was the
Yeah.
slogan of the student outfit of some of these political parties who are now active in Bangladesh.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chaudhary. Just for to supplement you for our international viewers, when we say spirit of 1971, that is actually the supreme charter of an inclusive, progressive, and secular Bangladesh. No other party ever, no other political narrative ever could replace that. And we still feel that unanimously that 1971 spirit of 1971 should be unequivocally the charter for an inclusive and progressive Bangladesh. Now, I will bring Ms. Chaudhary into this discussion. And as Mr. Jihan showed that there was a statement by Mr. Yunus that you have to be citizen, you cannot be Hindu, don't call yourself Hindus. Do you think that there is a hint of blaming the victims? And is it somehow kind of also support the perpetrators and give them a sense of impunity? Over to you, Ms. Chaudhary.
Thank you. First of all, it's an honor to have been included among very distinguished panelists and to be a part of this very important conversation. So thank you for the opportunity. Now, turning to your question, I think there are several critical points about the statement from the chief advisor and the kind of implications or the impact this kind of statement can have on the wider society, particularly as it's come from the chief advisor himself. So the first point I would like to raise is about the implication of an erasure of religious identity and cultural heritage. It's for many people in Bangladesh and everywhere across the globe, a core part of their identity is their religion. It's a part of the community they belong to, culture, and the social life they identify with. So telling people not to say I'm a Hindu could feel like asking them to hide or to suppress an essential part of who they are. It could lead to a loss of religious customs, language, traditions, temples, etc. And if people feel their religion is a liability, how contrary to what the chief advisor was saying, how does that ensure the freedom of religion, equal rights, and freedom of expression? So it's those are the kind of implications that you can have on erasure of a religious identity. Point number two is about the kind of victim blaming, which you've touched on, about sort of shifting responsibility. So suggesting that minorities should avoid emphasizing their identity so they don't become targets of attacks. It shifts the blame from those committing such attacks and atrocities onto the victims. So the kind of don't provoke logic. It can diminish state responsibility. So this kind of negligence can diminish state responsibility if minorities are told to play down their identity. It may reduce the pressure on authorities, law enforcement officers, to take appropriate action in those when those incidents happen. And the perpetrators have this kind of immunity, and the state fails to protect its citizens. It's kind of primary objective, if you like. Point three, I would like to emphasize on is how it kind of normalizes this kind of blaming the underreporting of violations of our fundamental rights. So if incidents are labeled as a normal kind of, it's a neighbor dispute, it's a personal attack or a political attack, rather than what it is, communal violence, there is a risk that serious abuses are masked and they are minimized. So, victims feel discouraged from reporting abuses. They don't feel safe about seeking justice if their grievances are dismissed as merely sort of just part of politics. And it weakens the minority voices and the mobilization, community cohesion, and the inclusivity that Mr. Yunus kind of talked about when he first came into his role. So if incidents where religious minority leaders, and we've heard about Chinmoy Prabhu being arrested, and those are in the back of all of this, you hear the chief advisors making such remarks. Religious minority leaders may find it harder to organize around religious or communal line. They feel discouraged to identify, identity based on those claims, and this can weaken the kind of collective advocacy.
On that note, maybe I can also refer to an anecdote here. I'm sure many of our viewers would know Nadia Ahmed, the famous British baker, who once said that I am at the same time a British, a Muslim, and a Bengali. So, and she said that it is possible to have all three identities at the same time. So a person can be at the same time Hindu and Bangladeshi, or Buddhist and Bangladeshi, or Christian and Bangladeshi. There are no contradictions between these two identities. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And telling people or determining how people should identify themselves is in itself is a kind of treads on the lines of violating their human rights, their right to
Yeah.
freedom of
And
expression.
also, you perhaps remember at the very early, I think back in August, September, at some point, Mr. Yunus either told in a public gathering or to a foreign media outlet that many times these attacks happened because Hindus were perceived to be aligned with Awami League. Do you think that this is also quite derogatory? I mean, I personally live in the UK, Ms. Chaudhary, you're also in the UK. If ever a particular community was identified and singled out to be aligned with a particular political party, that person would have lost their public position right away. What do you think
Yeah,
about that?
and I think instead of protecting, making such comments and remarks, instead of protecting citizens, it kind of throws them into greater risk of being attacked, greater
Being
risk of
attacked,
being
demonized, being
yeah. So
vilified. Yeah,
so the greater insecurity because of the lack of kind of the protection the state fails to provide them, and that it doesn't recognize that those the state's role is to protect those rights. And there's also the kind of international credibility issues, when the chief advisor goes around kind of dismissing the these as an attempt, and there's this kind of denial, if you like, of what's actually going
yeah.
on, or the whitewashing of what's actually going on. It's ignoring or minimizing reports of violence. This can damage Bangladesh's reputation, which I think the country has worked extremely hard to gain
Hard on that.
around
Yeah.
human rights.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Ms. Chaudhary. That's very helpful, very insightful too. Mr. Jihan, maybe you'd like to supplement here that why minorities are perceived to be aligned with Awami League, which means that Awami League as a party has been quite protective and supportive of the minorities in Bangladesh. I would like to reflect very briefly on that and then take us through the other aspect of these atrocities, which involve some different sects within Muslim or Islamic followers or Muslim communities. Yeah, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Day again. Like I said, Awami League is the party of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And our motto is secularism. We believe in peaceful, equal coexistence of all human, not necessarily Hindu or Christian or Buddhist or even Muslims.
I mean,
So,
I suppose when you say we mean we as Bengalis, and Awami League actually represents that Bengali cultural ethos. Just to clarify, right? Okay.
so Awami League not only protects any specific groups. Awami League is a party for all humanity. In Bangladesh today, not only the Hindus or the Christians or Buddhists are unsafe, even the Muslims are unsafe. Prominent Sufi Maulana Rumi once said, "Love is the bridge between you and everything else." The Sufi and Ahmadiyya sects of the Muslim communities, the Sufi, especially the Sufi culture, is a culture of promoting love and peace. And they have faced brutal crackdown of the extremist religious fanatics that actually brought Yunus to power. All across Bangladesh, hundreds of Sufi shrines from Chittagong to Mymensingh have been destroyed, vandalized, and completely gone. Mob they became so careless that they attacked the shrine of Hazrat Shahaparan in Sylhet. In Mymensingh, a Milad Mahfil of Hazrat Kalu Shah, I believe, was postponed after violent attack from the mobs. According to the Global Sufi Institute, there have been more than 80 incidents of reported attacks against more than 100 shrines across the country, across whole Bangladesh. And besides the Sufis, the mystic singers, the Bauls, the rural singers who promote peace, nothing but peace and non-violence, they have faced the same kind of crackdown during this 1 year. So as you're seeing, it is not only the religious minorities or the ethnic minorities, even the Muslim majorities. Muslim are the majorities in Bangladesh, right? More than 80% are Muslims. Even they are not safe. Those who are not extremists, those who are not fanatics. Only the fanatics are ruling the country right now. And besides this, the indigenous communities, the communities of the Chittagong Hill Tract, who were safeguarded by our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, they have faced unfortunate fate in this 1 year. Right after the fall in September, we have seen violence. There were murders. There were murders committed by Bangladesh military. Again, the brave Bangladesh military, whose only sign of bravery was the two murder of our two presidents. They brutally attacked these indigenous communities in the Khagrachori area. And it is not only in Khagrachori. When the indigenous community protested for some modification of their textbooks in the capital of Dhaka under broad daylight, they were attacked. In recent days, a 12 or 13 years old young girl was gang raped. So they protested. They want safety. They don't want to be raped. And what the government did, what this illegal interim regime did, they sent the Bangladesh military to crack down on these protesters and issue a forced rape report saying that there was no rape that occurred. And this is the actual scenario of Bangladesh. And for protecting our motherland, for protecting the country, we all should be really concerned, and we all should raise our voices
Thanks.
Whenever possible.
Thanks, Mr. Jihan. And again, that's a very concerning development. We have been witnessing in the last 15 months twice. There were violent activities in and around Chittagong Hill Tracts area. I'll come to Mr. Chaudhry. Your constituency is in Chittagong, and you are a local of that region. And we know that how that particular region thrived in the last 15 years with a lot of tourism and business activities. And there were pretty peaceful, very stable situation across the greater Chittagong, including the Chittagong Hill Tracts region. And right after this so-called July-August thing, we saw that sudden rise of tension between communities, and also twice, sadly, and to our greatest disappointment, Bangladesh Army opened fire to our indigenous community people, and scores of casualties happened. How do you assess this situation, Mr. Chaudhry?
See, Chittagong Hill Tracts is, of course, the most ethnically diverse place in the country. There are more than 52 tribes, different hill tribes who live in the region, and of course, Bengali settlers and indigenous Bengali people as well. And there were tensions there, starting from the 80s during the time of General Zia, who during his time wanted to change the demography of Chittagong Hill Tracts by bringing in landless Bengalis and illegally settling them across the hill region, which was more or less autonomous for many years, in order to protect the cultural and ethnic diversity of the area. The area was being given protection from the British period. After General Zia's this forced migration of Bengalis into the hinterland of the Chittagong Hill Tracts, they obviously rose up, and there was a separatist movement, and there were a lot of violence for many years. And in 1996, when our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina came to power for the first time, the first thing she did was to bring peace in Chittagong Hill Tracts area. When you bring peace in Chittagong Hill Tracts area, it has a ripple effect into the plain land as well, and business activities, investment, quality of life of these people, everything goes up, and there's a marked change in human development aspects of these ethnic communities. Not only that, they're taking part in the booming trade and investment of the country, but also the area has now been opened up for tourism from abroad and uh, from the rest of the country. However, there is a force there who were assisted by the fanatical parties, the fundamentalists, including the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, who had always played the ethnicity card. Literally, they wanted to change the demography of the hill tracts area, and after failing to do that, they had played the card of divide and rule in that area. As soon as the Yunus government had taken over in Bangladesh, we've seen ethnic strife in the Myanmar side, which is, of course, the adjacent country, the neighboring country of Chittagong Hill Tracts area. There was a rise of the Arakan army movement, who had taken de facto control of the Arakan region. The government, the illegal government of Yunus, despite objection and no recognition from anywhere in the world, publicly declared that they were going to work with the Arakan army, which is a separatist group, and wanted to open humanitarian corridor. In the name of humanitarian corridor, they wanted to send arms and ammunition to that rebel group inside Myanmar. So Bangladesh is now going back to the time of 2001 and 6, where it was basically being used as a base to export arms and to terrorists in the neighboring region. So, in one hand, they're illegally arming, assisting the Arakan army, which is, of course, more or less a terrorist group in Myanmar, because we do, irrespective of the Rohingya situation, we still have bilateral diplomatic relationship with the Myanmar government, and we have continuous trade with them despite Western sanctions and so on and so forth. But you cannot really assist a rebel group in another country and expect that things will remain calm in your end at your end. So at the same time, the ethnic communities in Chittagong Hill Tracts were parsed. In one hand, they were agitating, they were assisting the rebel groups on the other side of the border, but on this side of the border, uh, there were two groups of ethnic people, two political groups who belong to the ethnic communities. One was the JSS, Jonashanghati Shomiti, the other one is the UPDF, which was more terrorist in nature. And one of the leaders, Michael Chakma, staged a drama where he claimed that he was being held against his will in an undisclosed location, which they are calling as GOOM, or unlawful or illegal detention.
Disappearance and Ainaghar, the
Illegal,
so-called
yeah,
fictitious
the
Ainaghar.
Ainagor, the fictitious Ainagor. Mr. Michael Chakma belongs to that group called UPDF, which was responsible in steering up the situation in Chittagong Hill Tracts between the ethnic communities. And then when that political force has been unleashed there, obviously, what do you expect? You expect more chaos in that place. And when you send in the army to resolve disputes between civilians, it shows that you are only interested to parse the ethnic community and make the army a party into these disputes. Army, of course, does not run on its own. Army has to take instruction from the civilian government. Army is a disciplined force. If they're asked to do something, then only they will do it. They do not do things on their own. They don't have they're not supposed to take decision on their own. So the home advisor, illegal home advisor, I should say, Mr. Jahangir, who you've seen from his behavior how eccentric and how totally politically incorrect way, the way he runs his administration, and always talking without any relevance, without paying any heed to what is proper in a public office. And this man, he directly instructs military commanders, formation commanders in Chittagong Hill Tracts area and other places. Because he comes from the military background, he is a former lieutenant general. He misuses his position as a home advisor and bypasses the regular military commanders and instructs them to cause trouble in places where he wants trouble to be spread, trouble to spread. So Mr. Jahangir himself is directly involved in
Yeah.
in creating
And
problem
also
with
he
the
was overseeing the Gopalganj incident. So
Absolutely, he
yeah,
was personally instructing the formation commanders on the field, even though they had said and clearly indicated to him that these are unarmed civilians. We can't go and shoot at them, but he was insisting on it. I also wanted to remind our viewers here another point, which is that Chittagong Hill Tracts Peace Treaty was opposed by BNP, by Jamaat Islami, and also other fanatical forces who wanted to create terrorist hideouts in Chittagong Hill Tracts area. During our time in government, we had uncovered secret hideouts of many Islamic, I shouldn't use the word
militant
Islamic, but
groups, very groups. Yeah,
militant groups who were training with some tribal militant groups, and they were being trained. And we also have evidence that these trained individuals were then later brought in Dhaka, and you've seen how trained shooters and snipers were deployed as part of their master plan, a meticulously designed master plan to oust the government, and
yeah.
many of them were actually trained in Chittagong Hill Tracts in terrorist hideouts. So Mr. Yunus is targeting each and every geographic area in the country and creating as much anarchy as possible so
Yeah.
that he can continue to
He
claim
can
that.
perpetuate his stay.
Yes. So that he can say that it is still not time for an election, law and order situation is not under control, and therefore election cannot be held. And that this is the pretext. He knows what he is doing. In
Yeah.
order to just simply extend his tenure in government, this is what he will be doing. And you've seen in the last couple of days in Dhaka, there were so many arson attacks
Yeah.
in the cargo area of Dhaka airport, in fresh groups sugar mill. Today, I have heard that a launch, a ship in Shodorghat area of Dhaka is set on fire, and also another factory in Chittagong, Pacific Jeans, which is one of the biggest RMG exporters of the
Denim
country, it has
manufacturers.
been settled, yes, ablaze. And these are all planned in order to show that the situation is not under control, and it's not conducive for an election, and therefore you will hear the
Thanks.
man in a month or two. And he's also already said this to Mr. Mehdi Hassan in his interview, that apparently some people were telling him to stay in power for 5 years or 50 years, and they never put a timeline in his rule. So he's a megalomaniac character who
Yes.
wants to continue to rule without any mandate and create constitutional and institutional anarchy in the country.
Thanks, Mr. Chaudhary. Thanks. That's very very insightful comment indeed. Now we are coming to the last 5 minutes. I'm very conscious of time. Ms. Chaudhary, you are involved in various campaign activities, including direct involvement with the UK politics. So. How do you see that? As from the last statement of Mr. Chaudhary, it appears that by creating division and through this current Yunus regime is not only dividing and unsettling Bangladesh, but also there is a potential chance that there can be regional conflict. There can be a spillover effect in our neighboring countries, and also for an inclusive, progressive Bangladesh, which international communities always advise for. How do you see this whole thing, and what would you
I, I
suggest?
have
What
a,
would
I
be
have
the question?
I also have a question to Ms. Chowdhury here, because there's a big diaspora of
Yes.
Bangladeshis in the United Kingdom. How does she how does she think that this chaos and anarchy and rise of the extremists in Bangladesh, how is it going to impact the diaspora there? Because it is a huge diaspora, 1 million almost living in the United Kingdom. And if you have the country, the mother country, if you like, where extremism is preached, another Islamic state like structure is created, how is it going to affect United Kingdom? And I'm sure the United Kingdom will also be affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, attacks on minorities or any form of injustices, affects all of us anywhere, regardless of where it's happening. So the international community, we know, is watching closely with regards to what's going on in Bangladesh. And this issue of kind of minority persecution in Bangladesh is not just a domestic matter. In the view of rights organizations, as you've already heard Professor Day mention, Amnesty International has called the Bangladeshi authorities to carry out swift and impartial and independent investigations into these incidents. The UK Parliament, it's been raised the question of the attacks on minority groups. We've also heard it by European diplomats in the European Parliament. Other sort of Christian Solidarity International have also raised this through the United Nations Human Rights Council about the increased violence and persecution of Christians, Hindus, and other religious minorities in Bangladesh. So I think, the point to take away, and there are key points here around the, we've seen in history tells us what happens when we have this divisive politics. I think Mr. Jihan touched on the Nazi German, where we saw the scapegoating of, religious groups, the scapegoating of previous regime. And then, we had the rise of fascism, the rise of the far right. We saw it with Mussolini's Italy. We're seeing in the recent kind of history, if you like, in the United States, in Western Europe, and right now in the UK, we're seeing it with this divisive politics of them and us, and treating immigrants and migrants as second-class citizens, or depriving of their, these sort of increase in this discriminatory incidents that can lead to the corrosion of our democracy, the secular values that Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman embedded in our liberation movement and the liberation war and the constitution of Bangladesh, is values that guides a lot of and the diaspora community. I think it has a huge impact on how we live in a democracy in the UK. That it has impacts on our social life, our trade and relationships in wherever we are in the world. So I think it's really important that we, whatever platform we have, to raise our voices from wherever we are, and the need for the judicial independence and the protection of rights of minorities in Bangladesh.
Thanks, Ms. Chaudhary, and thanks our honorable panelists today. As we draw this episode of the Persecution Report to a close, the testimonials and insights shared today paint a deeply troubling picture of a nation in crisis. What began as a promise of reform and justice under the leadership of Muhammad Yunus has, according to our panel and mounting international evidence, devolved into a regime marked by fear, division, and systematic persecution. The targeted violence against minorities is not merely a series of isolated incidents, as our panelists mentioned. It is a pattern that suggests a deliberate effort to marginalize, silence, and erase the identities of those who do not conform to a singular version of nationalism that Muhammad Yunus and his supporting Jamaat-e-Islami and other far-right extremist, religious extremists are trying to establish currently in Bangladesh. The judiciary's complicity, the media's muzzling, and the international community's growing concern all point to a regime that is not only failing to protect its people, but also endangering them. To our listeners, awareness is the first step toward action. Share these stories, question the narratives, stand in solidarity with those whose voices are being drowned out. Because in the face of persecution, neutrality only serves the oppressor. Thank you for joining us. I am Professor Day, and this is the Persecution Report. Till we meet next time, stay safe, stay engaged, and never stop asking questions. Thank you very much.